brought to you today by VMware. I'm your host, Wyatt Cash, Vice President of Content Strategy at Fedscoop, and today we take a look at building the right foundation to the cloud. And joining us today, we've got three veteran public sector IT leaders who've been directly involved in one way or the other with working on or getting to the cloud, and have kindly agreed to share some of the key lessons that they've learned with our audience today. Beginning with Joyce Hunter. Joyce is Deputy CIO for Policy and Planning at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Joyce, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to connect and share USDA's thoughts.
Terrific. And also joining us is John Jedney, Chief Engineer at Data.gov. That's a part of the GSA, the General Services Administration. John, thank you for taking time to join us as well.
Thanks. Great to be here.
And we also have joining us Alberto Ferranato. Alberto is the Senior Director in Product Marketing and Integrated Systems for VMware. Alberto, thank you for joining us and taking part in today's program.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Super. So just also like to extend a welcome to our audience, including those who may be tuning in to our archived on-demand edition. Before we begin, just like to help our audience get familiar with our console and how they can participate. On your viewing console, there are a couple of widgets to use, including a Q&A chat window, and we invite our listeners to the live webcast to use that Q&A chat window to submit your questions to our presenters at any time throughout the webcast. And we'll try to answer as many of those as we can, either following each presentation or towards the end of the program. Also want to remind our audience you can download a copy of today's slide deck by clicking the file in the resource list widget. If you don't see it on your screen, look for it in the folder icon along the bottom. And you can also make your viewing of the slides a little larger or smaller on your screen simply by dragging the right corner of the slide area. Finally, I just want to let you know we will be recording today's program, and it will be available on demand over the next 90 days. So if you have colleagues that might have benefited from today's presentation, we'll give you instructions at the end of the program on how to just use the link you got for your registration to send that along and let others view the content of today's program. So with that, let's get started. So Joyce Hunter, we really appreciate again some of the things that you'll be sharing with us. Tell us what you've been experiencing at the U.S. Department of Agriculture as USDA's made a variety of efforts to adapt their IT and get moving to the cloud. So tell us a little about what you've been learning.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Wyatt, and thank you for all the participants who are on the phone. USDA has had a really good opportunity to evaluate cloud. We weren't the first ones to jump on the bandwagon, but we most certainly have evaluated some of the good, the bad, and the ugly that's out there. And so as part of my presentation, I'm going to take primarily a business focus as opposed to a technical focus. We're going to go over some of the challenges, how we built the foundation, some of the business considerations, what we have found are best practices for cloud migration, the steps to success, and questions. And before I get started, I wanted to acknowledge our IT fellows and Bobby Jones for helping me put together this presentation. Without their help, this would not be the stellar presentation that it is going to be. So jumping right into it, the challenges. OMB released a declaration in 2010 that all the government is operating under a cloud-first policy. This, of course, posed a significant challenge to all government agencies. First, the cultural transformation. What is the training needed to get people up to speed with cloud? Because people are trained primarily on how to manage an on-premise environment. Second is security and privacy concerns, like personally identifiable information, and access. Who gets access to different types of data? And then the data concerns. What type of data is being considered? Private, sensitive, classified, open data, the ownership of that data, and there are big concerns about losing ownership and losing control of that data. Government tends to operate behind the curve of technology, and our technology is generally outdated. This is an assumption not based on an actual metric, but we find it difficult to support new technologies. All agencies do, all departments do. Not only do we need to go through a cultural transformation, but there are deficiencies on the technology side like stovepipe applications where dependencies are really unclear. Our ability to be flexible and efficient is often hampered by restrictions and regulations. Moving to the cloud is not as simple as it seems when there are so many variations in technology and maturity levels within the organization. Particularly with USDA, is composed of 27 agencies and staff offices. So to my last point on so many variations and maturity levels, that's one of the issues that we had to face in building a foundation and building the future for cloud. USDA has found value in unifying the direction of our organization by talking about the vision, mission, and values so that there is a collective understanding. At USDA, we have a CIO council that meets on a regular basis monthly, and then we have advisory meetings that talk about these kinds of things, and that way it enables us to look over what somebody else has done and to evaluate what either we have done intra-agency as well as externally at some other organizations. We need to get the processes and technology up to par with industry standards. Defining a shared understanding and taking steps, dramatic if necessary, to achieve success is an important step in achieving such synergy. We can't express more and more. Communicate, communicate, and educate all the time. One of our IT Fellows teams researched the topic of big data leveraging the cloud and found a surprisingly common theme of needing to establish common terminology for big data and cloud. People have different ideas about what the teams mean, so discussions involving the topics frequently go awry. In addition, we found that organizations must set aside time to do a deep dive into the areas of planning, analysis, and documentation in order to determine the policies that are needed. With planning, roadmap with swim lanes to key areas like strategy, communication, security, and privacy. These types of plans are critical to the successful movement to the cloud. The ways of doing business on-premise are different in the cloud. Certain efficiencies can be gained through automation. For example, we discovered how the inheritance of security requirements through use of the cloud can simplify the required risk management framework. These types of plans need to be addressed prior to or even considering a movement of any data to the cloud. The second is analysis. Other analysis needs to be done in order to determine cloud readiness. For example, a thorough understanding of risks related to the movement of the cloud, like I had mentioned before, the data, and the sensitivity of data, etc. A thorough investigation of cloud and cost-benefit analysis is also very important. This is much more than running after the latest shiny thing. You have to know why and what it's going to do. It's the WIFM. What is it going to do for me? The third is documentation. Documenting processes and developing standard operating procedures are very, very important. These broad areas focus or enforce the need for organizational policy to help drive the way forward. Once a foundation and business needs have dictated a possible migration, organizations should consider using a proven cloud migration methodology. This diagram from HPE shows a possible strategy. Start with the discovery of existing workloads and their characteristics. This information will feed into an analysis of migration feasibility to determine the most suitable workload delivery models, in-house, private cloud, hybrid cloud, or public cloud. The next step is to map your effective tangible migrations that save time and money and reduce business risk. The first phase is discovery, consisting of a set of processes, tools, and procedures that create a comprehensive view of the end-to-end IT environment. The discovery process identifies workloads and the servers on which they run, physical and virtual, storage devices and databases used, resource consumption patterns, networks and components, relationships and dependencies among all these entities, and finally, the associated costs of ownership and operations. The suitability phase uses a combination of automated and manual approaches to assess workloads across 4 dimensions. Business suitability prioritizes business and IT needs to gauge cloud adoption feasibility at an organizational level. Financial suitability establishes the financial feasibility of cloud adoption and justifies the return on investment of application workload migration to the cloud. Technical suitability map application characteristics to characteristics of cloud platforms to determine technical fit. Application functionality mapping map applications, workload, functionality to the cloud, and platforms of choice. Mapping includes IT environment and application dependencies workload categorization, automation of development and operations, reference architectures, and infrastructures. Mapping takes input from the suitability assessment and uses analytic algorithms to evaluate the best target for each workload. For workloads that would be best suited to public cloud, the process also identifies potential cloud providers that would best meet workload requirements. The fourth phase, migration, moves the workloads from their sources to their target destination. This activity requires the use of specialized software and results in intact and operational workloads at the destination locations, data centers, or cloud, that can be immediately used. The migration process answers the questions of how to move the targeted workloads to the cloud effectively and efficiently, and how to mitigate the risk in the process. The final activity, cloud enablement, validates the connections, service levels, security, and performance considerations of the newly migrated applications. This enablement phase answers the questions: were all the target workloads migrated successfully, and did we achieve the expected value? As an example, here is a Microsoft Cloud Services reference model showing their way to form a service management foundation. Incorporating business and technology considerations will help create consistent processes and procedures, improve efficiencies, and increase likelihood of success in cloud implementation. This slide supports the idea that in order to improve service delivery, like moving to the cloud, implementing a service management framework is recommended and absolutely necessary. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Wyatt.
Sure, great, Joyce. Thank you, and appreciate that. One question that comes to mind from your presentation is USDA creating a suite of cloud services for all of its. I think you mentioned 27 different offices, or do you envision just kind of being more of a brokerage service and let each of those divisions kind of set up their own cloud projects?
Yes, we're the second, the latter. We are going to be a brokerage services. Our National Information Technology Center, called NITSE, is going to be the cloud broker. And we have right now on-premise, and we have commercial, Azure, and soon AWS. And the reason we decided to do this was because of high availability, and the ability of each of the mission areas to determine which works best for them.
Terrific. Got it. Thank you. Well, let me, at this point, I'd like to move our conversation to get another perspective. John Jedany, who's, again, Chief Engineer at data.gov, which is, I'll let John describe that more completely, but is a great repository for a tremendous number of data sets that the federal government hosts, and he's part of the GSA organization. John, tell us a little about some of your perspective on the use of the cloud, where you see it going, and maybe some tips for our audience.
Great, thank you for the introduction there, Wyatt. And so I'm going to take a more technical perspective on migration and really kind of some of the lessons learned since I joined GSA about a year ago. Prior to that, I was at the Department of Energy in CIO's office helping Tara, so have some perspective in kind of the multitude of systems and this kind of issue. So getting to data.gov, data.gov is 3 federal employees, and as a result, I'm responsible for managing our contracts, technical contracts, and implementation of managing our production environment, as well as managing our cloud migration over the last year. And I hope to, actually, as of 2 weeks ago, my role's expanding. I've been asked to become the infrastructure lead, which is really just a advisor to our new technology transformation service. And as a result, these are the sites that I will be advising, and there's a multitude of platforms that they're currently running on, different application frameworks, various different needs and services that they offer. So this is, I hope, something that I can also apply moving forward. So the cloud, can help you address a lot of key issues, namely velocity, volume, and variety. Is kind of, you need to have an understanding of what reason you're going to the cloud for. If you're moving or migrating an application or starting a new service, you have to kind of address these issues or ask yourself which of these issues is kind of core to this service or need. And really you have to ask yourself kind of, where is the pain currently? Is this particular function something that costs too much for various reasons? Is it procedurally or process-oriented, kind of very painful? So it's really, migrating to the cloud is really about finding what those current pain points are, and working to fix those, and leveraging the cloud and the availability and really the cost savings that comes with that.
Will any of it survive now, you think? Well, a couple of things. First of all,
so traditional IT is kind of what we talk about when we're talking about enterprise, and so it's not just about the technology. It's actually little to do with the technology. When we talk about traditional enterprise IT, a lot what comes with that is manual processes, people-centric processes, which don't scale, and that's a core issue. Reason moving to the cloud is to scale. So you have to do some homework internally and look at your internal processes, existing processes within the enterprise. You have to ask, how many emails does it take? How many forms, tickets, meetings, approvals? How many Word documents are generated as a result of providing a new system or service? Are there change boards? Are there procedural memos and memoranda and processes that are unique to your agency? Are there many others, for example, FISMA, that are applicable to every federal agency? And you really have to answer kind of, how many of these over-the-wall processes do we have? Because kind of doing well in the cloud really means about breaking down those walls and working collectively on every front. And I'll get into every front being kind of development, operations, and security, as well as kind of policy and compliance as part of that. And so that's really where we are today. And you have to address both of those issues. You have to address the kind of process-oriented issues as well as the technology. But the technology is not as important. So people are probably familiar with Jeff Bezos at Amazon. He was credited with kind of the first requirement that he put on his teams, and this is really important kind of just not specifically to this example, but really important that he made this declaration that every team, and you can think of this as in government as program or project or service, has its own discrete kind of domain, and as a result of that, we should be working across those services and programs at the API level. When we try to consolidate into one data center or kind of integrate through the database or data warehouse, we step on each other's toes. As a result, kind of change slows down because we have to have that more holistic change management process rather than what we see today evolving and really demonstrating itself as the most efficient process, which is these services programs have their discrete domains, and each team should be exchanging information data between those through an API. And I won't get, it's not really important about the formats here, but just wanted to highlight some of the, the data formats that are kind of coming to light. We see legacy systems tend to use XML as a way to exchange information. There's a movement to JSON, which is preferable. And then at rest, things like YAML, which is basically a more human readable form, is showing up in configuration files and other things that it's really important to understand these trends. And the premise of this is that the cloud is really just one big API that drives data centers. So there's not much different. There's still computers. There's still networks. There's still but everything is orchestrated through an API, and that's why it's really important to automate everything, because people are not very good at writing to or reading from APIs, and we really are reliant on software to automate these tasks for us. And so there's a multitude of factors that fall into this. You want to be looking at these. I think one of the most important parts of this to get started with right away is automated configuration management, and I'll get into specific solutions and what we're doing, but it is core. And configuration management, for those that might not be familiar, is basically describing how to build a system in code, and then that configuration management solution actually goes out and builds it, audits it, monitors it, can reprovision it. So that is a core question, a core technology that you need to have answered. There's many other things evolving, like chat ops. Old continuous integration and delivery is obviously a trend that's pretty well known, but it's incredibly important. And as we evolve, and as what I've been working on really is kind of the automated security and describing security in code. So we'll get into that a little bit. So, as I was mentioned before, breaking down the walls is the critical important part of migrating to the cloud. If you cannot move from Agile to DevOps to DevSecOps, or have at least a clear path or way to doing that, then you're really going to be hampered in really leveraging the cloud and taking full advantage of it. And that, Agile and in the enterprise is kind of the term, but it's evolving into DevOps, which is basically developers and operations working together, and both of them using Agile methodologies. And so the next phase of this is really bringing in security and compliance people into this process, moving it left, actually embedding team members in other suites so that we get the full benefit of collaboration, and not just kind of playing lip service to collaboration. And along those lines, one thing we've been faced with is kind of breaking down the myths and realities of kind of how security was done in the enterprise, and then how it's done well in the cloud. The old castle and moat approach of putting restricted firewalls and really shutting down all of the ingress traffic or egress traffic, and putting rules around that. It just doesn't work in the cloud. It just doesn't work well, I should say, because part of the cloud is this ability to scale and automate it and build fast and experiment. And really what that requires is that these services are specifically securing themselves and also and streaming data so that you know firsthand through monitoring and event management that there may or may not be a security compromise, because taking the protectionist approach will not really solve that fundamental issue of what we see today. And the biggest vulnerability we see is really the lack of the speed to patch, speed to deploy are the new critical vulnerabilities when we talk about real security in systems. So part of the automate everything is also having everything in code. And you might not be here yet, but it's important to have this as a roadmap item that you want to be first and foremost, using configuration management solutions, documenting infrastructure as code. But where we see the trend going is actually security or compliance as code, running automated tests that map to specific compliance controls so that we can automate auditing and automate a lot of the documentation generation that is otherwise done in Word documents, PDFs, and spreadsheets. We really need to be making this the next phase if we want to be leveraging, infrastructure level controls and be able to swap an infrastructure component for Amazon or Azure or Rackspace or whatever it may be, so that if you want to move your platform, it's not a whole new kind of system security plan and whole new rigorous process to get that security compliance put in. So I'm involved in a project. I won't go into too much. Everyone should check it out. It's being led by 18F and the Cloud.gov team, which is another service you should check out. They're going through their FedRAMP accreditation, and as a result, they're writing their system security plan in code, and that automatically generates a Word document from that code, so that if you have traditional people that need to concur, you can still generate the formats that they're used to. So I work really closely now with our ISOs and CISOs and trying to kind of rethink how we do security, and it is an evolving process, and we're very nascent in the process. But sorry for this was actually sent to me by our CISO, so I thought it would be funny if I put the DevOps Sec photo here. But really, what we're talking about is that developers want to move fast in operations, and they don't really have security mindsets because they're focused on features and deployments, and really they're consumed with those things. So the only way to bake security in is to automate it, is to integrate it. And so there are many ways now evolving on how to do that. I can specifically get into more, but I'll leave it to the questions. And so this is one example. This is our target for data.gov and some of the systems. We really believe in collaborating directly, sharing documents, reusing components, documentation, configuration. We're working on a continuous security pipeline that does everything from checking for two-factor authentication to doing, checking web headers and really checking the boxes on some of the common security vulnerabilities that we see in applications today. We have a plan to do our own documentation in code as well, and all of our current stack for data.gov at least is using Ansible as a way, and actually we use specific tags in Ansible to map to specific NIST controls, so that if we wanted to audit our system moving forward, we don't have to just stop everything for 2 or 3 weeks and audit a system and do that once a year and not really secure the system. We can do that anytime live. And the next phase of this, we're not there yet, but what we're targeting is, a subset of actually doing implementation through the places that we communicate directly with our teams, so that this concept of chat ops, it might be scary for many, but it is really controlled when you think about you can only require certain actions, to re-provision an entire service, to get metrics, to do logging, real time. You can really integrate well, and this approach has a lot of benefits. But again, it's incremental, and you're not going to get there in one night. You have to take these things as phases. And so this, from the technical perspective, what we see the trends are moving towards is, these legacy monolithic applications, and the next slides will cover that, but these monolithic applications really can only scale vertically. And what does that mean in the cloud is just getting bigger instances, paying more money for a particular service, which if you have a simple service and it doesn't need to scale, that's fine.
This would happen.
So
What we've seen is very proud.
what we really see the trends moving towards is this horizontal scaling, which means microservices, and then the serverless, which really is event-driven, so it builds a container, runs your specific job, and you don't have to pay for a running server all the time. So these are the trends moving forward. And here's just some, advice of what we've seen, where we tried to kind of break down our application stack into more microservices, which is the goal, but you don't have to get there right away. Microservices really the only benefits that they have is this kind of this concept of independence, right? So if I deploy or redeploy or make an update, it's not going to break your service. In a monolithic application, change happens slowly because you have to factor in all of those services and all of the impacts and all of those things when you talk about schemas and whatnot. So it's really important to kind of have this independently deployable units. It gives autonomy to developers and programs to innovate. And if you don't break the API, then you don't break other teams' reliance on your data sets that they may need access to. And so just one approach, I'll wrap up here in a second. It's doing this is kind of taking this traditional enterprise where the database is the integrator, and instead allowing each service to have its own model, and each service then interfaces with other services, and making that interface the stability point, and not necessarily having to have the global integration, which is just unpractical. So start at one service at a time, find out where the bottlenecks are, map where these attributes are sharing and where they're flowing to across these services. You'll find redundancies, you'll find a number of things. It's really important to do the legwork on looking at the actual data. Let the data drive it. If you started the people, process, programs, and trying to kind of refactor or better integrate or drop services, you'll get caught up in the bureaucracy of having those debates. And one thing that I really strongly say, if your team is not comfortable, or your security team is not comfortable moving sensitive data to the cloud, then what you should do is leave that data there in the data warehouse in the service, and then encrypt that, create a token for it, and then use that token, which is encrypted and has no bearing, has no PII anymore, as what's being interchanged at the service level, so you can't get compromised data at the higher levels of service. And I said it before, each team puts a contract in place, and that contract is your API. A really good method for thinking about this is 12-factor, so I implore you to check it out. I won't get into it, but it's kind of how to think about taking down or refactoring services. And I will wrap up there, and just some closing points. Again, this is really about true collaboration, integration, not just playing it lip service. This is about high engagement with your internal teams, and learning collectively, sharing collectively, reusing, and really getting a goal and a vision established for the program, and then keeping it small and incremental as you move forward. So,
John, thank you very much, and appreciate you made it was a great tutorial in a lot of ways. I appreciated a number of your points around chat ops, for example, and maybe we can double back on that, and the obvious importance of microservices in the cloud. But before we do that, let's hear from Alberto. Alberto, you have an interesting perspective as well, looking kind of at how do we integrate all this. Tell us a little about what you're seeing in the way of building the right foundation to the cloud.
Sure. Thanks. It's been very interesting to follow the discussion so far. Many great points that are really relevant for what VMware is doing in general and how the industry is changing around IT. So in the next 15 minutes slide, I'll try to recap a little bit some of the key trends that are motivating innovation and R&D that VMware is bringing to market, and also offer a quick summary of some of the key elements of our product strategy going forward as a software provider to enable that focuses on enabling cloud computing. Very quickly, in terms of trends first, obviously digital transformation is a very hot topic today. We believe it's the core driver behind a lot of the changes that are happening within IT. Just judging by the number of Google searches on this topic, you can see how this has become such a determinant factor of how IT is planning to make investments and evolve over the next 5 years. Digital transformation is not something that is restricted to one particular industry. It touches everything, obviously including government agencies and education, and it is at the core. And IT is at the core of it. It's really the key enabler for any industry to make this digital transition. And in many cases, this means rethinking the way we construct our applications and how we deliver value to our end users. In digital transformation is not just a high-level trend or a simple technology trend. I think ultimately really goes at the core of most industries and changes business models and changes expectations of end users. And so this really affects how we need to start thinking about our IT architecture, our way to operate IT, the way we access resources, and how we architect our applications. And this puts a lot of pressure on how we react to a rapidly changing world. If you look at Gartner research, the number one reason why organizations today look at cloud computing is really to have greater agility and speed. By all means, that's the number one aspect that people want to get out of the cloud. And more in general, what does cloud mean? That's a very interesting subject. I think today the adoption of public cloud is under everybody's eyes. When you ask to VMware customers, we see over 60% of them already using public cloud services, and over half using multiple public cloud services, with AWS and Azure being probably the most popular choices. But public cloud is not the only aspect that they need to deal with. In fact, IT needs to care about both the public and the private, and many applications for the time being will still continue to live in the private. In fact, the most recent predictions is that 70% of applications by 2010 will still continue to be on-premise. And so in our view, when we think about cloud, we fundamentally think about a hybrid cloud where you now have the flexibility to access IT infrastructure and resources across a distributed network of data centers that could be owned or rented, but fundamentally a hybrid world. And the big challenge that many VMware customers have today is about really how to build the cloud. Getting access to enterprise level and highly dynamic services for compute, storage, network, and security, it's a table stake today to be competitive. But stitching them together to build an agile cloud still is a big challenge, and a challenge that doesn't necessarily create a lot of differentiation, because we all have to do it. And so customers are asking us for a simpler path to get to the end goal. When you look at technology adoptions and key capabilities that are being adopted today to evolve the data center and IT in general, it's easy to see that there's high demand for technologies that simplify infrastructure. And legacy infrastructure is certainly a key roadblock towards agility. Customers want to simplify infrastructure in a variety of ways. If you look at the key trends around hyperconverged infrastructure, network virtualization, containerized application infrastructure as a service, or public cloud, they're all aimed at simplifying infrastructure. However, the struggle is how do you bring them together? How do you avoid having to invest or over-invest resources to stitch together point solutions with complex integration processes, and how do you avoid lock-in? An additional element and challenge that we need to factor in as we think about how to set ourselves up for a hybrid cloud going forward is security. And security is very interesting. On the one hand, business owners and end users today play a critical role in sourcing IT services directly from the public cloud. In many cases, at times, just do it even without IT necessarily knowing about it. But if you ask who is held accountable to really maintain security across these services, IT still plays and is seen as the critical owner. And so how do we enable this new world where business owners want to have flexibility of choice and rapid deployment without losing control and ability to maintain security? So all these trends play a critical factor in our strategy for helping customers and IT organizations building the hybrid cloud. In the next 5 minutes, I'll go over the key principles. As we said, fundamentally, we believe we live in a hybrid cloud world. So we want to enable customers to be able to source in a very agile way IT infrastructure and resources both on the private and the public cloud. From an architectural standpoint, we believe that in order for us to achieve the level of agility and promise that we look for from cloud computing, we need to move to an infrastructure model that is fundamentally software-defined. Software-defined means that all aspects of the infrastructure are being virtualized and delivered through software that is software components that are hardware independent. So compute, storage, network, all delivered through software-defined technologies. And this is important because by doing so, we eliminate those dependencies with the underlying hardware that make it hard to automate infrastructure. And so software-defined infrastructure is fundamentally more programmable and can be more easily automated either through your own automation or in many cases what our customers are using, deploying a cloud management platform on top of it to enable IT self-service or application templating to have agile provisioning and management of applications. Software-defined infrastructure also allows you to lower costs by switching to commodity hardware. And so always, there's constant push towards becoming more efficient, moving towards commodity hardware and industry standard x86-based hardware is a great way to do so. And lastly, it makes it easier for now to provide access to enterprise-level services across any location, both in the private and in the public. And so that's why we have pioneered the idea of a software-defined data center model and introduced a whole number of technologies that are redefining how companies provide infrastructure services today. Now at VMworld this year we made a number of interesting announcements from a product implementation standpoint, and I would like to call out one in particular, spend a couple of minutes to explain how it, we believe changes the game. It's really looking at our whole vision at the foundational layer, right? After all, here we're talking about how to build the right foundation for the cloud, and in this respect, we recently announced VMware Cloud Foundation, which, in our view, has a very important achieves a very important goal and towards this ultimate objective of hybrid cloud. So what are some of the key aspects and interesting points, and how is it contributing to evolve the way we think about cloud computing? The goal of Cloud Foundation is to provide a new paradigm for building a cloud through an integrated infrastructure platform that makes it easy to deploy a complete software-defined data center either in the private or in the public cloud. Ultimately, Cloud Foundation, from an implementation standpoint, at its core, integrates well-known and mature technologies from VMware, such as vSphere, vSAN, and NSX, into a single integrated platform that has built-in automation lifecycle management capabilities. This is critical to simplify the processes around building and maintaining the cloud. The whole day zero to day two aspect of managing a cloud infrastructure stack is greatly simplified, from the deployment to the configuration to the provisioning and ultimately to the patching of the cloud stack. Many of you are familiar with hyperconverged and hyperconverged architecture in general. You're familiar with the benefits of moving to a scale-out server-based storage model. Cloud Foundation, in this respect, really opens up a new set of possibilities, building on top of this increasingly adopted architecture for storage, building on top of that and adding network virtualization out of the box. And so for the first time, we believe we now could take advantage of the full potential of elastic, scalable infrastructure, not just at the storage level, but also at the networking level. To achieve the full automation, you can then layer on top of, as I said, your cloud management platform of choice. A key element of our strategy, and going back to the data point here, the initial assumption that most environments are hybrid in nature, is to make our software stack available across the private and the public. And this is important because we want to establish that layer of software that is globally consistent across the private and the public. More recently, we have announced a number of partnerships to deliver Cloud Foundation software through service providers. In particular, you've heard about our announcements with IBM, who's already offering a Cloud Foundation-based service today, and our stated intention to deliver a similar service through Amazon Web Services. Those are just two examples. Our strategy, obviously, is to enable a broad ecosystem of service providers, and so more will be added to that strategy. Today, customers can already, as I said, leverage IBM or deploy the software on-premise. The importance of this is that on one hand, you have flexibility of choice. You're not getting locked into any one particular service provider. You have freedom of moving applications from the private to the public or vice versa, because you have a globally consistent platform that runs and provides the same set of services across any data center network. And this allows you to fundamentally have the flexibility of choice to deploying your workloads wherever you want. We shouldn't be going in the future. We shouldn't be restricted like today in terms of making decisions on where to run a particular applications. The infrastructure should be globally available and should provide the same level of enterprise capabilities and availability that allows you to make decisions based on your specific needs and not based on some special situation that a service provider forces you in. So remove lock-in risk and enable you to have this globally distributed environment that can be operated with the same set of tools and with the same set of skill sets. And so better leverage what you already know from your existing data center deployments. The last critical aspect that I'd like to mention before wrapping up is, and goes back to a lot of what John and Joyce were mentioning, the rapidly evolving landscape of how we architect and build applications. How do we ensure the underlying infrastructure is future-proof to be capable of running applications that could be delivered in the form of virtual machines or the emerging container type applications. And this is another key objective and another key aspect that we want to enable through our cloud platform, which is essentially to provide this common application, common infrastructure layer, common software defined infrastructure layer that can be consumed by a wide range and different application frameworks and solutions, whether traditional virtual machines or more recent platform as a service and container type based solutions. So a single platform that can be universally applied to different workloads and application constructs on the private or on the public. And with this, I'll turn it over to Jesse for questions.
Sure. Alberto, thank you so much. And, it's very encouraging to see how far we've evolved. A couple of questions, though, that I'd like to direct to various members here on the panel. And I might point this one to John first. So, John, I think Alberto described the importance of a foundational layer in a hybrid environment. But as you lead your teams to do the DevOps you were describing, can you talk a little about what challenges you're running into as you try to get more agile, try to do more DevOps in a quicker time so that they can work both in a cloud and or in a on-premises hybrid environment? What kind of challenges and what would you advise our audience they might do about that?
Okay. I'll try to take that one on. It's a pretty tough topic to get to. So what we're faced with is a lot of different technology suites, a lot of different web frameworks and configuration management solutions, and underlying cloud infrastructure providers. I think a core thing that you should consider is having a platform, and there's platform as a service and getting that right for most use cases. The example in TTS is we're funding a lot of projects to cloud.gov, which kind of absolves a lot of the underlying architecture and needs from a security documentation perspective for each individual system. So I think what we're faced with is trying to move away from having each system basically require the full set of documentation compliance requirements, the full budget that goes along with funding infrastructure and platforms. So it's not easy by any means, but I think reusability, so infrastructure as code, configuration management solutions are far better to handle a transition in, say, a contractor or a new use case or a new functionality. It's a lot easier to build from that. If you don't have that to begin with, it becomes really difficult.
Appreciate that. And I'm going to ask Joyce this next question. So Joyce, we talked a little bit about a hybrid environment. You mentioned at the conclusion of your remarks that you are looking at more of a kind of a brokering role. Can you talk a little about how USDA is moving forward to plan for a hybrid environment so that what you're developing and what you're offering to the different bureaus can kind of work in multiple environments?
Excuse me. Yes, sure. What we look at, our target, as I mentioned, is a hybrid environment to use on-prem and commercial cloud simultaneously, because it all depends on, because we have a variety of different agencies and missions. We are going to have NHTSA be the broker, and they will go through the entire analysis to determine exactly, what the cultural shifts are to establish the acquisition guidelines and to determine what the policies necessary to support the cloud adoption, and then establish the organizational roles for brokering. That auditor and carrying services are going to standardize on enterprise service models. And we have to understand also that this brings a change to our investment planning. Everything that we do, of course, is based on the investment of the agency and how many investments they have. And cloud is a consumption-based pricing model, which is a significant change to the buy, build, and maintain activity. So we have to have both, so that depending upon what the investment requires, then the agency has the ability to make the appropriate decision on which model fits them, and whether it's an on-prem, whether it's pure cloud, or whether it's a hybrid.
Appreciate that. And John, I'd like to go back to you and talk a little bit more about cloud.gov. Can you describe for our agencies in the audience here a little of how they might be thinking about how cloud.gov could be a kind of a support system from your organization so that they can kind of accelerate their efforts to the cloud?
Sure. So namely, what the Cloud.gov team is doing a lot of the grunt work and a lot of the hard work on doing their FedRAMP package, and looking in the next couple, say 2 to 3 months, and basically finalizing that, and that level of inheritance as infrastructure providers and that are currently FedRAMPed, that does absolve you of a lot of the requirements of compliance and documenting the compliance and having audited full scope. So Cloud.gov's approach is really developer-centric. It's really service-centric. So if you have a particular application, it will run it for you, is basically the approach. It will ingest it, it will build it, it will assign the IPs and domain names, and allow you to route traffic to it, and allow you to really quickly think that the approach that Cloud.gov is using underlying software is Pivotal Cloud Foundry, but the biggest part of it is that the speed to experiment, speed to fail, is what really offers the best, a really appetizing solution because of that speed to actually be able to test some of those use cases out, and not go through some traditional Word document-driven compliance, and then not have provisioning through web forms and the like. So it's really about removing the old antiquated processes and allowing kind of self-service. I think self-service is a really important part of what you can offer as a solution.
I know a lot of people would agree with you. Alberto, I'm going to cast this last question to you, and then we'll need to wrap up. I think we all would agree there's a lot of competitive fervor out there in the cloud space. Do you see the kind of an evolution taking shape to create enough common standards, certainly with your foundation layer that you described, that allows sort of an ability for interoperability across a hybrid cloud environment, but with multiple players, and then of course agencies with legacy systems? Do you see that they were making advances, good strides towards sort of common operating systems in the cloud?
Yeah, I think there is a little bit far out looking at where we're at today. Certainly, public cloud is a very nascent trend. It's very rapidly growing. It seems that it is kind of there's greater gravitational pull around certain specific providers. There will be industry-specific also providers that will focus on delivering cloud services to companies in a particular industry, and so the jury is already out. Certainly, we as a company want to enable that type type model going forward for the reasons that we discussed. Because what we hear from many customers today is that today cloud is kind of recreating a little bit of the legacy silo problem that we used to have with physical infrastructure from various hardware providers back in the days. And so the last thing we want to do is to just shift the bottleneck someplace else and create the same issues of lock-in into individual specific services. And so that is part of our strategy. We are just at the beginning of it. Obviously, the announcements and this type of platform that we talked about today was just announced. So it's early days, but it's very promising.
Well, it does sound promising indeed, and I'm afraid, though, that we're going to have to leave it there for now. I'd like to thank our guests, Joyce Hunter at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, John Jedini at GSA and Data.gov, and Alberto Ferranato at VMware. I want to thank you all for taking time to share some of your respective insights on today's program. And, of course, I'd like to extend an extra thanks and acknowledgement to VMware for underwriting today's program. Would like to finally thank our audience for tuning in today. Just a reminder, you can download a PDF copy of the entire slide presentation from today's program by clicking the file in the resource list widget on your console. And again, if you have colleagues who would benefit from getting the slides or hearing the commentary and some of the many fine points that we heard today, please consider sharing the webcast link that you received with your email registration. The broadcast is free, and they'll have up to 90 days to view the archived edition of the program. Look for more of our daily news coverage on the cloud and government IT on Fedscoop.com. And on behalf of all of us here at Fedscoop, I want to say thanks. This is your host, Wyatt Cash, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for being with us.